People who haven't experienced abuse often struggle to understand why people remain in abusive relationships. They might believe you're perfectly capable of leaving. I'm sure they keep wondering, but they're adults. Why aren't they leaving? It's a toxic relationship. It's damaging. Why can't they leave? In reality, though, trauma bonding makes this extremely difficult. Trauma bonds are a result of an unhealthy attachment. An unhealthy attachment. Yeah? A person may develop a trauma bond because they rely on the abusive person to fulfill their emotional needs. For example, a child relies on their parent or caregiver for love and support. If that caregiver is abusive, the child may come to associate love with abuse, believing that this association is normal. The child may be unable to see the abusive caregiver as bad, right? The child may instead blame themselves for the abuse as a way of making sense of what is happening to them. This allows the caregiver to continue being good in the child's eyes, which reinforces their bond. I don't know if I'm clear. If you're new here, Sharifah Namusisi is my name. I am a CBT and marriage counselor at Let's Fix It Individual and Couples Counseling. If you're already a subscriber, thank you for the love. In a trauma-bonded relationship, not only has a victim created a super strong emotional bond with their abuser, they've also created an attachment that makes them feel the only person they can get love from is the abuser. The irony, right? When someone's main source of support is their abuser, a trauma bond can develop. An abused person may turn to the abusive person for comfort when they are hurt, even if the other person was the one who caused it. Now let's talk about the cycle of abuse. Some abusive relationships follow a pattern of abuse and then remorse. Yes? After causing harm, an abusive person may promise to change. They always do. Some may be especially kind, sweet, or romantic to make up for their behavior. Yes? He beats you today, you're on a trip to Paris tomorrow. Now, this gives the abusive person hope that their suffering will end and that they will one day receive the love and connection that the perpetrator has promised. The person experiencing the abuse may see suffering as a price to pay for kindness. Now, look, remorsive behavior may also cause the abused person to feel grateful, particularly if they have become accustomed to the poor treatment. This reinforces the bond. Now let's talk about some of the signs of trauma bonding. Yeah? The main sign that a person has bonded with an abuser is that they try to justify or defend the abuse. They may also, 1, agree with the abusive person's reasons for treating them poorly. 2, they may try to cover for the abusive person. You protect them by keeping the abuser's behavior as secret. 3, they may argue with or distance themselves from people who are trying to help, such as friends, family members, or even neighbors. Yeah, like Toina Chobagamba. For them, they're going to protect the abuse at all costs. 4, they could become defensive or hostile if someone even tries to intervene or attempts to stop the abuse. You know, imagine like a bystander trying to stop the abuse. The person who is being abused will for sure defend the abuser. That's another sign of trauma bonding. Another sign, they could be reluctant or unwilling to take steps to leave the abusive situation or break the bond. Now, a person bonded with their abuser might say, for example, he is the only one that loves me so much. You guys wouldn't understand this. Or they could say something along the lines, she's under a lot of pressure at work. She can't help it. I'm sure she'll make it up to me later. Or, I will never leave him. He is the love of my life. You guys are just jealous. Or, I know it's my fault. I keep making this guy angry. Another key sign of trauma bond is if you feel unhappy and may not even like your partner any longer, but you still feel unable to end things. Does that sound familiar? Yeah? When you do try to leave, you feel physically and emotionally distressed. Yes? When you say you want to leave, they promise to change but make no effort to actually do so. Right? You fixate on the good days, using them as proof that they truly care. You continue to trust them and hope to change them. Please remember that people do not choose abuse. They also can't help the development of trauma bonds, which most times are driven by some pretty strong biological processes that sometimes we have no control over, like the freeze response. Perhaps you're familiar with the flight or fight response, yeah? Your body's automatic response to any perceived threat. Maybe you're even aware that people respond to threats in 4 different ways: flight, fight, freeze, and fawn, yeah? When you face abuse or fear the possibility of future abuse, your brain recognizes the impending distress and sends a warning to the rest of your body. Adrenaline and cortisol, the stress hormones, flood in, jump-starting your survival instinct and triggering emotional and physical tension. Now, here's where the power imbalance comes into play. If you don't feel as if you can safely escape or stand up to the person abusing you, freezing might seem like the best option. So you stay. When thoughts of the abuse become too painful, too difficult to bear, you choose to focus on the positive parts of the relationship and ignore or block the rest. You might make excuses for them and justify their behavior to rationalize your need to stay. Each repetition of the cycle can reinforce this sense of powerlessness. The seeming certainty that you will never be able to escape. You come to believe the false reality they've constructed to control you. You need them. They need you. You're nothing without them. No one else cares about you. These lies can chip larger and larger blocks from your identity and self-worth, tying you even more tightly to this relationship. Hormones play a part too. I know. Hormones can be powerful reinforcers. You only have to look at dopamine's role in addiction to find support for this. Dopamine is a feel-good hormone, yes? Dopamine has a similar function in trauma bonding. After an incident of abuse, the period of calm that often follows can ease your stress and fear. You know, the apologies, the gifts, the trips, or the physical affection offered by the abusive person serve as reward that helps reinforce the rush of relief and trigger the release of dopamine, the feel-good hormone. Now, since dopamine creates feelings of pleasure, it can strengthen your connection with the abuser. You want the dopamine boost so bad, so you continue trying to make them happy, to earn their love and trust. We will look at the role of hormones probably in another video, but I would like to say breaking the bond can be hard, especially for people who experienced abuse in childhood. They often feel drawn to similar relationships in adulthood, since the brain already recognizes the highs and the lows of the cycle. A history of trauma can make it even harder to break the trauma bond, but you can learn to stop this cycle. How, you ask? Number 1, know what you're dealing with. When you recognize the existence of the bond, this is very important, a very important first step when it comes to abuse. Of course, this is often easier said than done, I know, but it does not mean it cannot be done. Number 2, try keeping a journal. Write down the things that keep happening each day to help you begin to identify patterns and notice problems with behavior that may not have seemed abusive in the moment. When abuse does happen, note what happened and whether you or your partner said anything afterward to excuse it. Yes? Number 3, consider the relationship from another perspective. Pretend you're reading about your relationship in a book. It's often easier to examine negative events when you have some level of detachment. Pay attention to the small details that make you uncomfortable or give you a pause. Yeah? Do they feel healthy to you? Does their behavior seem okay to you? Number 5, talk to your loved ones. Maybe you got angry, brushed off friends and family when they expressed concern in the past. But these loved ones, your family members, your friends, they can actually offer essential perspective. Please challenge yourself to listen and make a real effort to consider the accuracy of their observations. Number 6, avoid the self-blame. Avoid the self-blame. Believing you caused the abuse or brought it onto yourself can make it harder to exercise your autonomy, effectively keeping you in the relationship. Please remind yourself that abuse is never your fault. No matter what you may or may not have done, no matter how deeply you fear loneliness or a life without them, no matter how many times you've already gone back, you deserve better. Replacing self-criticism and blame with affirmations and positive self-talk can help this truth begin to take the hold. Listen, you need to cut off contact completely. If you decided to move on from a trauma bond, this is the only way. Once you make the decision to leave, disrupt the cycle completely by stopping all communication. Of course, if you're co-parenting, this may not be possible, but a therapist, I can help you establish a plan to maintain only necessary contact. Create physical distance by finding a safe place to stay. They might insist they'll change, don't they? They might say they'll go to therapy. They'll do anything in the world as long as you'll just come back. These promises can seem pretty tempting, yeah? But remind yourself of how many times they've already promised to change. Get professional help. While you can take action to begin weakening the trauma bond on your own, these bonds tend to hold fast. You might not find it easy to break free without professional support, and that's absolutely normal. That is where we come in. I can help teach you more about the patterns of abuse that drive trauma bonding, and this insight can often provide a lot of clarity. In therapy, you can also explore factors fueling the bond. You can work on setting boundaries. You can learn skills for building healthy relationships. Confront self-criticism and self-blame. Develop a self-care plan. Address mental health symptoms related to long-term trauma and abuse, etc. Look, it's worth noting that these feelings of attachment do not necessarily end when the person leaves the harmful situation. The person may still feel loyal or loving toward the person who abused them, or feel tempted to return. Turn on your notification button so you don't miss my next video on the 7 stages of trauma bonding. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.